partnerships here at the Common Mission Project. This year's event is called Building Clusters of Innovation in the Age of Disruption. And what we want to be able to do with you today is to have conversations with each other about the current state of innovation education. I just want to make sure, Jennifer and Edie, are we showing the sharing the screen?
Yep.
All right.
Yes, I will be back.
Very good. Thank you.
You're
So
welcome.
just a little bit about where we're at on today. Because we're using Zoom, and now that we've been in our third year of COVID, we recognize, thank you. We recognize that we are all used to the COVID protocols as far as etiquette, but I would ask you to follow the following. When you go to a breakout, please mute yourself. And so we don't have extraneous audio. You will probably be go to video off. And if not, we'll ask our moderators, our tech moderators in the background will either mute you or make sure that your video is off. You are very welcome to use the chat. You're very welcome to use the chat. But what we would also like you to do is utilize the Padlet that we're going to have available to record your thinking. If you want to ask a question, we will ask if our moderators will be looking in the background for very interesting questions. At the end of our sessions, we'll have one or two opportunities for you to ask questions. And if so, we'll ask you to step up. If you're having tech issues, please contact EDC or Jennifer R, either in the chat or at support@commonmission.us. Next, please. Next slide. There you go. And so up front, we want to thank our sponsors. Our sponsors, Common Mission Project, VentureWell, GCEC, the Global Consortium of Entrepreneurship Centers, as well as Bowie State University. Just real quick, next slide, please. Because we want to have this as a community curated conversation. In other words, we want everybody to have their voices heard. We're going to ask you to take advantage of the Padlet. Padlet is an online whiteboard or online tackboard where you can post ideas, thoughts, links, white papers, even images if you want to on this Padlet. If you want to take your phones out, you can take a picture of this QR code so you can do it on your phone, or you can go to tinyurl.com/Lean Innovation Summit. Again, take a picture, tinyurl.com/Lean Innovation Summit. And this will lead you to a Padlet. When you get there, there are 8 columns. So you had to slide left or right. When you get to the top, hit the plus button, then you can start to contribute your thoughts. And it's very simple. It's very straightforward. We're going to collect this information because what we want to do is to compile it all together. And in the new year, what we want to be able to do is to create some white papers and some thoughts, both collected from you, from the chat, in the Padlet, as well as we're going to kind of reach back out to our experts and maybe give some of their thoughts. And so that will be available for you. So next slide. Jerry, I'm going to hand this over to you and you can start there.
Sure, great. Thanks, Ty, for that great welcome. So I'm Jerry Engel. I'm at the University of California, Berkeley, and some of you know me from past experiences in talking about lean innovation education. It's almost 5 years ago that we ran our first, well, that's an overstatement, sorry. It's several years ago that we ran our first summit, and we organized it as a face-to-face meeting. How naive that was. And we met in Silicon Valley. It was December of 2019. And our topic was best practices. You know, how could we learn from each other? So many of us had been introduced to lean innovation education, the methodology, through either reading some of Steve Blank's work or Alex Osterwalder's work, or actually having a chance to use the I-Core program as a way to bring this methodology to our institutions. Well, at that meeting, we reflected on 5 years of practicing lean innovation education and looked for best practices. Well, then disruption hit, COVID, right? And that's been a theme for us as we've continued these summits. In July of 2020, in December 2020, in June of 2021, and last time, February of 2022. And this process of disruption, if I could have, I should hand it to Alex for, I'm sorry, for his welcome. But I just want to complete my thought. But this process of disruption is continuing, and it leads us now, in our current environment, which we'll talk about, to try and figure out how this creates opportunity. We've had an earlier chat just before this call about how disruption really creates opportunities. How can we help our students capture opportunity, and how can we help our educating community, us, capture opportunity for ourselves in terms of how we teach and capture opportunity for our students? I want to turn it over to Alex Gallo, who can help us reflect on how the contributions of our thought leaders have contributed to this whole series of discussions and how it helps move us forward today. So Alex, would you do a welcome from CMP? And we really appreciate the support of CMP in creating this possibility. Over to you.
Cool. Thank you so much, Jerry. I really appreciate everything you do. And I want to just note your leadership and vision bringing together this community. And I think it's a very, and I'll get onto this here, how the importance of this community, I think it's extremely unique. But I'd just like to welcome everybody to the 6th Lean Innovation Educator Summit. I am Alex Gallo. I serve as the Executive Director of the Common Mission Project, which is a 501c3 nonprofit here in the United States that delivers all the Hacking 4 programs, which are also Lean Launchpad based. We also do this in the United Kingdom and Australia. I do that alongside my colleagues, Ali Hawks, who you'll see later in today's session with Alex Osterwalder, and Jamie Watson in Australia. And CMP is delivering today's program. And I want to also thank the CMP team who's behind the scenes today doing the heavy lifting to make this summit happen in the lead up to today and also throughout the event. And I want to a special thanks to Ty Smith from CMP, who's been leading us along the way. So thank you. As I mentioned, I'm extremely excited for all these Lean Summits because this is a very unique community, and I see it for 2 reasons. First is we not only transfer knowledge in the classroom, but we're also changing the world through what we're doing through our Lean Launchpad classes, through entrepreneurship and the methodologies and the entrepreneurial outcomes that we achieve through our work. And when I reflect back on the initial ideas that were started at Stanford and Berkeley, now scaled in some way, a large part through I-Core and Hacking 4 programs globally, I know we're making a collective impact on the world. And in many ways, that's reflected in the audience we have here today. You can see in the chat that we have folks from all around the world who are taking on the Lean Launchpad movement. And so I'm really grateful for all who've taken on the mantle to work on real world problems through experiential and applied education. And one of my messages today is that the opportunity to solve more problems with more problem solvers through this methodology, we haven't even hit, I think, even close to the frontier. I think there's so much opportunity in front of us. And that's what we're excited for at Common Mission Project. We're starting to build a Hacking for Impact program at Common Mission that will work on social impact problems around hacking for climate, hacking for oceans environment. We launched this about a year ago. And we want to build this globally. And I'll be talking about that a little bit more later in the session, but I do want to just note that to the community. There's a really great opportunity to get involved in solving these type of problems around the world. Today, in today's session, we're going to spend the majority time learning and hearing from you all. So please bring your insights around diversity and inclusion, which will be one of our breakout sessions, the entrepreneur's mindset, tech trends, and of course, our pedagogical approaches that we use in the classroom. But my ask is to make it all geared towards how can we make real world impact and change. At the end of today's session, you'll hear from Alex Osterwalder as well, which will be special through a fireside chat. And that will be a great bookend to this event. So again, I just want to thank everybody for coming on today. And so my call to action today is actually for this conversation not to die here today, but to continue on. And I think there are three ways that we can continue the conversation. The first is we have a Slack for the Lean Launchpad educators that I encourage you to join if you're not already on there. There's good conversation going on there, and please bring your conversation to that Slack. Second is we'd be happy to organize panel and roundtables that we've done before around these topics so we can get more human to human interaction around these various topic areas. And then finally, think about the opportunity around hacking for impact. See if you at your university would like to teach hacking for climate in these kind of courses, because we'd be happy to facilitate you in that. So again, my call to action today is let's keep the conversation going beyond this summit and in conjunction with the next summit. All right, thank you, Jerry, and thank you for having us here. Over to you, Jerry.
Alex, that is so well said. Thank you very much. And I'm not going to take up any more airtime because I want to hear from John Blejo and from Ivy Schultz. So John's going to speak to us about how they've been able to use a partnership with I-Corps to really build a robust network and community in their region that supports this, that this network supports each other and really goes beyond just looking at the institution and its own curriculum, but looking at the whole community and lifting it up. So John, take it away.
Great. Ty, can we have that slide up?
Yes, that's slide number 16.
While we're getting the slide, I just want to thank everyone for participating here. The one before that, I think.
Oh, sorry, yeah.
Yep.
All right. So, Jerry threw the gauntlet down about innovation in the age of disruption. And the challenge with disruption is that you have to create something that didn't exist before. So as a case study, what Ivy and I would like to do is go through the evolution of the NSF I-Corps node very quickly. We're going to take just a couple of minutes here. So when we started out, and this is for those people who want to create an innovation ecosystem, the first thing we did was define our region. We picked a 4-state region. What was the archetype of people we wanted to invite? We looked at institutions that had engineering schools, and then we vetted it even further that we looked at schools that were listed in the NSF's top 200 for funding at the time. And underneath, I say the establishment of the network, October 2013. After we had organized this network, we actually pulled this together as a white paper, and it was presented at the VentureWell Open in the spring of 2014. And the reason I like to show the first slide, if you see the little logo in the upper corner, that is the image of all the schools that were partnering with us. Now, in this white paper, and Jerry had asked me to talk about the invisible things, the things that really leads to resilience and enables these types of networks to be created. When we went for school recruitment, we began at the top. We actually invited presidents. We got buy-in from the presidents, and then we asked the presidents to identify their own points of contact. So all of the schools wrote us letters of support. Another thing that we did was we organized quite often networking events. In our first networking event, we invited Errol Arkalik to give us the history of I-Corps. And the people who attended were those senior administrators at the institution. We opened up these networking events to everyone. And the result of that was within 5 years, we had a very broad but shallow network. Some of the invisible things that we did to maintain this network was having our website. We had a newsletter. But social media really seems to be the major way that people interact, as we saw with this meeting. LinkedIn was very helpful in advertising this meeting. So where we are now is it's the age of disruption. We've actually started all over again. The call was to go geographically local and to go deep. And then when we assessed the ecosystem around New York City, we realized that there were at least 10 major medical centers in our ecosystem. So we decided to go all in on life science. So that means schools like Rockefeller University, Mount Sinai, who have never participated in I-Corps, are now part of our hub. So the challenge, we're back to where we were almost 10 years ago, having to re-educate the leadership, but we did exactly the same thing. So we built a new ecosystem doing exactly the same thing by going after the leadership. So I'd like to end before I give it over to Ivy. Next slide, please. Some of you may have seen this paper. Could I get the next slide, please?
Jen?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, some of you may have seen this paper. And my reason for showing it again is, the idea is, why was our ecosystem so successful? And the reason is it's led by deep technologists. This paper is actually published in the European Physical Journal D. The topic area for that is plasma physics, which is actually very popular if you've been following the news and what came out of Livermore on Tuesday. But the reason it's in this journal is that is who we were targeting. This is who we were writing this article for, were high energy physicists. And the senior author here, Kurt Becker, this is his space. This is his area. He's the Vice Dean of Engineering at NYU. And even in the new hub, the Columbia PI is the chair of electrical engineering. So with that, I'd like to turn over, with the minutes that are remaining, to Ivy, who is actually the Director of Entrepreneurship at Columbia Engineering. All right, Ivy, thanks. And that's it for the slide.
Great. Yeah, thank you so much, John. And thank you to everyone here. I'm so happy to be part of this community of innovation. And I think to be part of a community means you need to show up and listen to each other. So I'm glad that we all have the chance to do that. I agree that this community, we're changing the world in a really unique way. The way that I see it, and I think a lot of my colleagues see it, is that students now are interested in making the world better, and specifically through using technology. The engineers that we meet want to make the world a better place through the use of technology. And that could be reacting to the pandemic, it could be climate change, it could really be anything. And I think one of the most important lessons is that, we know that you need to start with the problem in lean education. And if you're working with students who want to change the world, you need to start with a problem that they really care about, and you need to define it well. So I think that's one of our big lessons, is just defining a problem really well for students to start with. And they might come in with something, or they might need help tweaking that, but I think that that's a key lesson. And from Columbia, from our colleagues in New York City, we've seen this translate abroad, and I'd like to share a little bit about how that's worked for us in Tunisia. We've been working with an organization there now for 6 years. We have a true collaboration, and we've had a lot of success. But the main lesson is that it takes time to build this. And I really have to go back to something that John Blaho always says when we finish a cohort, which is, now you're family. And I think that you have to treat people like family if you want to build community and you want to build real collaboration. And I think that's been a huge lesson for all of us, because when you're family, you keep showing up, you keep, you keep persevering when things go wrong, and you really keep including people, even if you're not sure if they're the right people or not, you keep them involved. So I think that's something that we will keep doing. The other thing that American universities do really well is they build alumni engagement mechanisms. And I think we are doing that in the New York hub. Our alumni engagement is very strong. I think that's something that everybody has to reflect upon when they're thinking about the future of their entrepreneurs and how to support them, is how to really keep that family strong and build that alumni engagement network the way that so many of our universities have been doing but really expand on it and make it even better. So I know we're short on time. I will stop there so that I can get us back on track. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you. Alex?
Great. And also I want to, I don't know if Pete Newell is on, I'll invite him to join if he is on now, but I just would like to start talking about lessons learned from our Hacking 4 program and where we're going. I think it very much ties in with what Ivy talked about. What has happened in our Hacking for Defense, Hacking for Homeland Security, and Hacking for Diplomacy that Common Mission Project runs is we've achieved what we would call, product mission fit. And that has a lot to do with the problem and a well-defined problem. And that's where, we're very much tied in with Ivy's point. And the thing that I would also add on to that is the human side. We do a lot of work, not only curating the problem, but also curating the problem sponsor and training the problem sponsor and how they engage in the course. And what we have found is that leads students in a way and a pathway down towards not only being connected to the problem, but the institution that they're working on. And for us, that actually, I think that creates some of those transformative experiences that students have to want to go further and take their engineering degree and work on environmental problems. And that's how I often talk about it, is students often enter the course as engineers and they leave as environmentalists because it can have some transformative effects. And so we've grown this to 60 universities in the United States and 75 when we add in the UK and Australia. And where we're going with this is exactly that, is that we want to expand our Hacking for Impact program. And around this concept of being problem-based and well-curated problems that have well-curated sponsors who want to work on those problems with the student teams in an intimate and engaged way across a university semester. Our desire is to build this program globally, as well. As I noted at the top, we've already launched it in the United States about a year ago, and I'm proud to say that this next academic year, we're going to have the largest cohort of Hacking for Impact, and these are Hacking for Climate, Hacking for Oceans and Environment than we've ever had. And we have a budding potential program with the United Kingdom and Australia. And so from natural disasters to national security, energy to the environment, we think this 21st century problem solving method will help us solve the greatest challenges of our time, again, through well-curated problems and well-curated problem sponsors has been one of my lessons learned. And I see Pete's on as well. I'll hand it over to you, Pete, as well.
Actually, I was going to let you keep talking there. You were on a roll. I think I have to say, those of you who saw my post on LinkedIn, and if you didn't, I'll find somebody who can post it. One of the, I call it epiphanies. As entrepreneurs, we're constantly trying to learn about the things we do. And I think, Hacking for Defense, having evolved over, 8 years into Hacking for Climate and Hacking for local, there's so many different versions of it. One of the things that we've learned is the need for an incredibly vibrant ecosystem to plant it in. And, here for the past couple of years, we've looked particularly hard at the Hacking for Defense program and the relationship we had with a single government sponsor, and realized that we were hitting a glass ceiling in terms of our own imagination and our ability to, to scale the program effectively, but also to learn about different models for how we apply it. And more importantly, how we use that as a voice to help lots of other people. So I think our decision to move the program and the programs back to the Gordian Knot Center at Stanford University was kind of a coming home for us. But the intent is to allow not just government, but also commercial and private parties to lend their resources in terms of time, energy, and money to growing a platform that doesn't just look at a single agency's problem, but actually looks at those problems that cut across the ecosystem for everybody. Obviously, from the national security perspective, we are interested in types of problems that are represented amongst the allies, that by harnessing, really bright young people in Australia, we may learn something about a problem that exists in the UK and a potential solution, that exists someplace else. And by bringing all those people together and quite frankly, the learning that comes from on the course, we stand a much better chance of finding the right solution at the right speed and applying it. So we are really, really excited by the opportunity to broaden the academic connections, not just the United States, but broaden them in the other countries that are championing the cause. We are excited by the opportunity to see more universities in more smaller ecosystems enjoy the opportunity to be part of this great movement. So for instance, we're having a deliberate conversation with the Japanese about launching a program in Japan. There's a conversation in Singapore. For the longest time, there's a conversation in Chile, as well as Canada and a couple of European countries. So I think this move really represented that opportunity for us to disrupt ourselves and to really look at what we had the greatest opportunity to do the greatest good by expanding outside that. That's one. The other thing that we realized is that all of these different programs, whether it's defense related, climate related, impact related, public safety, or health, the principles that we have learned and applied from lean innovation still apply. And the goal to work in a place where we can really dig into the pedagogy of how we teach innovation and entrepreneurship, not just to the folks who are going to launch companies, but also to the ecosystem they're going to launch into, is incredibly important. So you'll hear us talk over the coming year about the concept of innovation doctrine at the public policy level, of how we help large organizations actually establish the environment that takes advantage of this type of work and takes advantage of the types of people that we're graduating from our programs. And finally, I think you'll see us take on the opportunity to combine the best and brightest of what happens in I-Corps with what happens in the Hacking 4 courses, and combine a hybrid model that actually allows us to take real problems connected to real technology and real people and make progress much faster. So lots of, I don't think I've seen the Common Mission Project team, the BMNT team, as excited as they were about a month ago when we pressed the reset button and moved this entire program. So lots of energy in what we can do, and I'm truly looking forward to taking the things we've learned from the last several years from the Lean Innovation Educators Conference and actually starting to put this stuff to work, and testing those ideas and coming back and figuring out what works. So Jerry, once again, as usual, thank you for lending your name and voice to the world, and Ty and Alex for the hard work that you guys are doing, and Alex Gallo, who I've not Alex Gallo, Alex Osterwalder, who I've not talked to in a long time. My appreciation for taking the time to join us. Alex, back to you.
Okay, I've got it. Just want to say thank you to all four of you for showing us great examples of where the rubber hits the road, how this is actually putting partnerships with funding sources and partnerships with educational institutions to create real opportunities on the ground, using our students and educators as the engines of innovation. So thank you for your leadership, and thank you for your continued energy. So with that, let's move to our subgroups. And Ty, I'm going to hand it to you to introduce these three wonderful subgroups on diversity and inclusion, entrepreneurial mindset, and tech commercialization. So how do we move forward?
Well, thank you. I'm for those that have signed up, we tried, if you've been here before, the breakouts were breakouts that had just questions, and everybody was asking the same question. So we challenged ourselves to do something a little bit different. And so we've come up with 3 tracks broken out into 2 sections. Again, diversity, ecosystems, curriculum, and emerging trends. And so I am going to be moderating the ecosystem. And so what we're going to be talking about, and my colleagues will open up their mic and talk about read off just a little bit about what they're going to be looking at, just follow up. And so mine will be, the first one will be about diversity and inclusion and empowering underserved student populations to participate in high potential new ventures creations. Specifically, we're going to be looking at historically Black colleges and universities and how they offer a rich opportunity for federal partners, academia, and industry to partner with some of the brightest yet underserved academic communities around the United States. At the second session, we're going to be looking at creating a robust, open, and partnership mindset for your institution. Specifically, we'll be talking about university entrepreneurship and innovation programs that have partnerships with government and industry organizations, opening partnerships to new talent and ideas, and are oftentimes not burdened with what's been done in the past. And so we're going to be looking at what your university can do to build those robust partnerships with the government, nonprofits, and industry. And so I'm going to turn it over to my colleague, James. Go ahead, Jim.
Hey, Ty, thank you very much. Good afternoon, good morning, wherever you are in the world. Thank you for joining us. So I'm Jim Santa. I'm the Director of Curriculum at the Common Mission Project. If you can think of me as I'm the keeper of the pedagogical flame between ourselves, BMNT, the Gordon Center, all of our partner universities. I'm excited today to be able to moderate 2 sessions in the curriculum vertical. The first one is going to be how entrepreneurship educators impact the innovation mindset in students and faculties. Really, because as faculty members, we play a central role in that student experience, we have this opportunity to provide them with the tools and resources to propel them into innovation and entrepreneurship opportunities, starting their own businesses, going to work with federal partners. A lot of great opportunity there. I'll be joined with some great panelists on that first session. Second session as well, going to have some great panelists joining me there, and that's going to be how activities in the classroom inform a mindset of disruption in our students. I did see a question in the chat earlier about the flipped classroom or in the Padlet. That's one of the things we talk about, and that's one of the things that makes Hacking 4 and the Lean Launchpad methodology so unique. So looking forward to seeing you there. Again, if you're interested in joining those, you'll be able to find me in the entrepreneurial mindset session of the breakout rooms. Thank you. And Ty, I'm going to pass this over to our colleague, Rodrigo.
Thank you so much. And I don't know if I can share my screen, Ty.
Rodrigo, I don't know if we have time for that, so we can get to the breakouts.
I'm sorry, I misunderstood. I thought it was already there. Yeah, I just to introduce myself. Thank you so much. I'm an academic advisor with the Common Mission Project. And other than the opportunity to talk with all of you, my main role with Common Mission has been to with Jim help build an opportunity so we can create the platform so we can discuss with each other our curriculums. I'm normally a professor at the Naval Postgraduate School at a university from the Department of Defense of the United States of America, where I teach, and I've been teaching for more than 15 years, entrepreneurship and innovation. I mostly, or in my day job, let's say, I mostly like to study how the bad guys innovate and counter innovate our efforts to limit their forces, so how drug cartels, how terrorist organizations apply innovation practices in their business models. And I also study the process of disruption in technology, in technological environments that are relevant to military and defense. So I'm very pleased to be here, and I hope we'll have a good conversation.
Outstanding. Okay, so At 1:45, we're going to open up our rooms. We're going to go to the point where you will be able to go and do a breakout. And so at the bottom of your screen, there should be a set of breakout rooms. It's a triangle with four other triangles. She started to create the breakouts. You will be, of 170 people, you'll be able to choose your own adventure. And so when you hit the breakout, as you probably know, you'll see either ecosystems, curriculum, or ecosystem, or emerging trends. Woohoo! I got it. Emerging trends. And so we are now at 137. At 1:45, we will start our breakouts. Jerry, over to you. Otherwise, we will see you in the breakouts.
I'll just take this opportunity to express just the reality that everybody's been pushing to keep this thing on time, and I really appreciate that. We all do. Please feel free, if you want to drop into your conversation room now early and just have a casual conversation among yourselves before the official convening of that session at 45 minutes after the hour. But don't hesitate just to drop in and have a chat with who's ever there. And that way you'll start your small group discussion. You can introduce yourself. So I see some lively stuff going on in the chat. That's super. So I'm going to drop personally myself now into a breakout and meet who's ever there. And we will convene those three sessions officially at 45 minutes after the hour. Thank you, everybody, for this conversation this morning.
And by the way, don't forget to use the Padlet to capture all your thinking.
That, we think of entrepreneurship as being the start of businesses, and that's true. And I think there's a lot of value in that terminology, or that definition, excuse me. But we're also saying, what does an entrepreneurial mindset look like? So in the Lean Launchpad pedagogy, I think what that really does mean is it's taking a step back and defining the problem space. And I think that's what entrepreneurs do. They're looking around, they're doing discovery, they're talking with individuals, and they're understanding what the domain actually looks like instead of going right into solutioneering, something Rodrigo and I discuss quite frequently. And it's building that mindset of trying to figure out, what am I really trying to solve for? Does anybody care about this? What's really going on in this space? And as an example that I see in the classroom frequently is, I'm presented with a technology problem. 8 times out of 10, it becomes a policy or process problem. Why? Because the students are able to go through and challenge those assumptions and be able to go through discovery. So I think that entrepreneurial mindset and how universities are approaching certificate programs and pathways to entrepreneurship is changing dramatically. And we're seeing that around in with our partner universities. Another thing that was interesting too, was feedback and failure points. I think that a lot of students, especially younger students, have been conditioned to see failure as a bad word. And I think that what we're talking about is that regardless how we frame it, failure is an opportunity to learn. And we have an obligation in the classroom to be able to provide that critical type of feedback to our students that allows them to see failure as a tremendous learning opportunity. So that became a really great the discussion topic. Had a lot of great chat in our room about that, like how defining that. So it's really I think it's just how we frame that feedback. And just as another plug there, Rodrigo and I did do a podcast on providing feedback in the flipped classroom. Anybody would love to check that out. It's a great opportunity there to kind of see the way that even the research around feedback has been becoming more robust in recent years. And then I think what we're doing, lastly to kind of talk about here is that we are also representing that the change in the world is affecting us as educators as much as it's affecting our students. Thinking about the stress that we're having here, just as individuals, how our students are experiencing that. We have a lot of high achieving, some of the best universities in the world. How is their mental health? How are we approaching these students in such a way that we are able to still provide the education and feedback that they need, but also understanding that they've got a lot of stuff going on there. So I think it's a great opportunity for us as educators to be paying that much more attention. I think the flipped classroom does provide that extra level of diversity in the way we approach things because we're not there at the lectern. The paradigm is different. So how are we paying attention and being out there with our students as partners in their experience? And I think those are things that we're seeing change and shift over time. So those are the broad topic areas that we got into in our our breakout, Jerry.
So it sounds like this really comes around to the design of the classroom and the design of the experience. Now, this is something Jim Hornthal was making a big point of in your room, I think, about the design of what students actually do and how they experience it. So this point of failure, we have a comment from colleagues in Brazil about how that is such a big point for them culturally, how you can begin to exemplify the failure as a learning experience rather than a personal failure. That's
Absolutely.
fantastic. Thanks. Sounds like you had a lot to chew on and to build on in your second session.
Yes, absolutely. Thank you,
what
Jerry.
do you think are going to be the key head notes for you in mindset when you go into the second session? Because I know people should be mixing. Our design of the sessions is that choose one, choose mindset, for example, for the first one, and maybe choose curriculum for the third, or to technology commercialization, to mix and match your experience. But so give us a head note in terms of what you're going to carry forward into the next session.
Well, one thing I didn't cover is going to be talking about experiential learning. So that's something that we're seeing a lot in from the faculty that I go through with their after action reports following the semester, and just what I'm hearing again. One of the ones that Paul brought up was the bad idea session. How do you take a bad idea and use that to brainstorm good ideas off of that? So there's a lot of great exercises and things that we're talking about. That's going to be something that carries over, and I think just the overall the feedback mechanisms that we're having in the classroom and how we're preparing them to tackle problem domains is something we're going to carry from that previous session. So I think there's going to be some similar conversations, certainly, but we're going to be building in and talking more about the experience in that flipped classroom and what we have to do to show up as educators.
Super. Rodrigo, coming to you next. I saw a lot of discussion about technology commercialization and linking technology commercialization to the actual thought process and research, and whether you're contaminating the research with commercialization or whether you're enriching the research, etc. But bring forward some of the key points that you've taken away and where you might bridge to your next conversation.
Perfect, and we did attempt a summary at the end. That said, if at any point I'm misinterpreting the information and knowledge of the hive mind, please, anybody who was there, feel free to correct me or to expand on what I say. That said, yeah, we started with a conversation of the commercialization pipeline. I thought we would go to the usual suspects of the technology transfer office or whatever. Instead, we ended up in a completely different direction that had to do with what are the skill sets required. So when you are going through the innovation path, you can build already from the beginning a path towards commercialization, right? So I guess that if I had to choose out of every all the information that was communicated in that room, if I had to choose one sentence that made it clear for me, it would be, it starts at the beginning, right? So, and that your path to commercialization should already be there, visible somewhere down the future, and you should be working towards it. It requires, some people said, some kind of, it should be respected as much as we respect other elements of Lean. The commercialization path should be considered as an important part of the process, not an afterthought, not something that you do once you reach the end point of having your cool MVP and having your demo and whatever. And that, I think, was something that kept coming constantly. It has to do with the design of the team, the design of the situation, the design of the environment. The word design came multiple times in contexts, right? So you set up yourself for desirability and the opportunity to get not only to verify if you can build it, but if people want it. So in many ways, I thought that the conversation, this is me editorializing, I thought that the conversation was almost bringing us back to the origins of the principle of Lean, that you don't want to build something people don't want, and that the commercialization process, well, it's part of that pipeline of building a desirable a product or service. So overall, a really interesting conversation that took us to a more original point in where almost saying that commercialization will fail almost at the origin if you haven't built the structure, the structure to make it work well. And some great examples that we're giving of efforts that different universities or people in the workroom have used to try to deal with these pain points that solve them effectively.
So this ties beautifully back to some comments Alex was making and Pete was making about whether you start with the problem, do you know somebody needs a solution, or do you start with the capability, the research, and then try and find the problem that's going to solve? And that balancing act is a challenge for educators.
Yeah.
Ty, I loved your conversation in your room. It was real lively. And, having taught at an HBCU myself, I thought I understood the challenges and the environment, but I learned a lot listening in. That was a fantastic session. So what were your highlights, and how should that be bridging forward to our next session? You're on mute, Ty.
I thought I got this thing down. I would say very quickly that the HBCU environment is not about the capabilities of the students, of the universities. A lot of it comes down to capacity. A lot of it comes down to opportunity. A lot of it comes down to awareness and access. And so how do you find the either the people or the institutions, be it the government institutions, be it corporate institutions, be it private capital institutions that can fund those opportunities. We also talked about commercialization. Commercialization is a huge part of this, being able to extend the good work that happens in the institution and pull it out so others can find it. They were identified like VentureWell or Common Mission Project as partners that can happen, that can do that. Right. But it really does come down to intentionality, and how do we create intentional space for this to happen? Over.
Well, the power of space. That was a big comment there out of Bowie. You want to just talk about that for a minute?
So Bowie State had a president with the vision and with the vision to say entrepreneurship is not just something that we do. We're actually going to throw money. We're actually going to put it in the fundamental documents of the new president. It literally is written. I actually happen to be an adjunct faculty over there, an entrepreneur in residence, and so I know what they're doing. I know that they built a $42 million building dedicated as a learning, living laboratory environment where students can actually produce their wares. They get classroom experience, and they are living there, as well as every student coming in, I think, gets exposed to 5 hours of entrepreneurship. Every student coming in, every freshman, and that's
real mindset stuff, real
absolutely.
And it just as a footnote for those of us that aren't at institutions that can afford that kind of dedication resources, the power of place can just be a dedicated room, a dedicated time, but dedicating visibility and holding up the flag can do so much to move an institution forward, even at the first stages. So anyway, just congratulations on a great chat. So we're going to move into our second round of sessions. And is Sabra here?
I have not seen her. Is she?
Okay.
It's Sabra. Hello,
Sabra. She is. Sabra. So thank you. So just real quick, Jerry. Rodrigo, love you, man. I really appreciate you being willing to step in. We had not, Sabra, we didn't see you, but guess what? She's here. So awesome.
Sabra, I'm looking for you on my screen to try and find you. Could we spotlight Sabra, please?
You cannot miss this pink office, I promise you.
There you are. There you are. Hi. So for some reason it says James Santa. You're not James. You're Sabra.
No.
Okay. Could you give us a shout out on your session, and in inviting people to join you in your session? What are going to be the topics of choice?
Great. So looking forward to chatting with everyone momentarily. We're going to be talking about our future generations in innovation. We understand there are macro trends that surround everything that we're doing. How do we really leverage that in the right way and understand how do we make use of those macro trends? What can we expect, and how do we help students navigate that in the best fashion possible? What are lessons learned? And how do we move forward together using the wealth of partnerships and opportunities available to us?
Cool. Give us one or two examples of what you're calling a trend.
I would certainly think that the acceleration of technology and let's look at the demands within national security, right? We know that there are external factors such as, yeah, I
Right.
can go
No,
on
that's
and
good.
on.
Yeah, you could list many more, but those are elements. Okay, cool. So rather than taking any more airtime for organization, Ty, is there anything else we need to know before we go to our subgroups? You're on mute.
Just wanted to make sure everybody knew that we still have the Padlet available for you to look at and to populate. Again, it'll continue to be open for the next 7 days through the 19th. And we're going to take that information, just boil it down to themes, ideas, and we're going to populate that so it goes back out to you sometime in February.
So as a reminder then, thank you very much for that, Ty. As we segue, just a reminder for our agenda, and if we could bring up the agenda slide, that'd be great. We're moving now to discussion group 2. After we come back from that, at the top of the hour, we're going to do at 4 o'clock Eastern, if you want to know what hour that is, you're somewhere in the world, 4 o'clock Eastern. We're going to be sitting down and having a chat, all of us, with Alex. I'm going to moderate that chat, but I'm going to be looking at the input we get on the chat to bring you into the discussion. And then we're going to have reflections on that discussion by some real thought leaders in entrepreneurship education. So see you back at that time. And we'll be coming back into this room 15 minutes before the hour at 3:45 Eastern to sort of summarize what we learned in our second discussion groups. Let's go. See you all soon. Okay. Just about time for us all to be back together. Hopefully we've enjoyed our subgroup conversations. What we're going to do in the next 15 minutes is sort of talk to each other about what we learned in the subgroups. And we're going to have the leaders report out, of course, but also we're going to all have our eyes in on the chat at the same time. So if you want to raise your hand or something, or enhance or amplify a certain comment, let us know and we'll try and create the opportunity. So, Jim, you led off last time. Why don't we just continue in that order?
Okay. So the second session we had this afternoon for our experiential learning, or not experiential learning, our curriculum actually did kind of dump into that experiential learning. And I think part of what the experiential learning conversation there was teaching students how to think differently. So this is one thing that is kind of a segue into that is, as faculty members, we don't know everything. That's just the nature of it. Somebody told me that if all of knowledge is listed as a balloon, somebody with a doctorate knows a pinprick somewhere on the outer exterior of that balloon. That's our knowledge. And bringing in individuals who can be good mentors, providing appropriate mentor training to be able to facilitate that, and getting the trusted network together for your students to help them facilitate their experience in the classroom. I think the other thing there too was building networks that are not just with, you think about from a development perspective, the people who've got deep pockets, but the individuals will have the most impact to the student experience. So one of the things that came out of there is a peer-to-peer mentor network. So how are we utilizing different individuals in the peer network for the students peer networks, as well as building out that network of individuals who can help facilitate those different areas of problems that you may be experiencing or problem statements that you're getting in the classroom. The last bit there is that experiential learning. And I think the important thing in a flipped classroom where the paradigm is different, you're not standing in front of that lectern every day, you're there with the students out front, is providing, whether they're games, whether they are case studies, bringing in external speakers, like I've mentioned, having interview labs or acquisition officers come in and be able to kind of facilitate and build out that student experience. So thinking differently, what are we doing on campus? Janetta had a great one where they're doing there's a coffee shop on campus that's helping facilitate experiential learning and seeing students go through that experience. So what are we doing in the classroom to inform a disruptive mindset when they leave the classroom? And I think that's really where we have this tremendous opportunity to reframe our role as educators in the classroom.
In your room, Jim, did the issue of dealing with people at different stages of their educational career come up? like high school versus undergraduates versus freshmen versus upperclassmen versus graduates and PhDs, and how the mindset thing and curriculum is the same or different, or how did we tease this out? Any insights from your room?
So we didn't have anything specifically talking about the different like stratification of education levels and how we approach all of that in our particular breakout.
Mm-hmm. So I'm just going to ask the whole room here. Does anybody want to share any brilliant idea they've had about specifically with the earlier stages of education, dealing with freshmen or high school students, or even sophomores, but underclassmen, in terms of affecting either mindset or curriculum? Anybody want to throw out a brilliant idea, or even an okay idea? I'm looking for a hand. I'm just looking visually for a hand. Yes, thank you. Brandon, go for it.
I don't know. I think if you play for real chips, it can be more fun. So I try to, I think the Hawkins School in Ohio, they had students learning Lean Launchpad curriculum, but actually partnering with local small businesses to solve business problems using sort of lean methodologies. So when it became about an ice cream shop that everyone loved, it made it more tangible and real.
Making it tangible, getting them out of the building. Jeff, what a brilliant idea. Thank you, Brandon. Jeff Reamer.
I teach a dual enrollment class from college, but it's actually delivered to high school juniors and seniors. And this wasn't my choice, it was given to me, but we start the program going through the ELI program, the Entrepreneurial Learning Institute, talking about the Ice House book, if everybody knows that, where it just talks about this guy who sort of became an entrepreneur by accident, and what were the 8 characteristics he possessed that made him well suited for that transition. And I think it helps the students to look inside themselves and say, oh yeah, I have that. And look, if he can be an entrepreneur because he has those characteristics, so can I.
Fantastic. Thanks, Jeff. I appreciate that. So what I would just want to stimulate the group to think about is, in a lot of things that a lot of our topics, it has to do with dealing with the front of the funnel as much as dealing with the back of the funnel. And since we're dealing with commercialization and real ideas and real problems, we often at times focus on the back of the funnel. And we got to enrich the front of the funnel, whether we're talking about diversity and inclusion, or we're talking about just stimulating entrepreneurship for economic development, or we're talking about just getting people thinking about responding to chaos in robust ways. So thanks, Jim, for that great session. Sabra, take us forward. You're on mute, dear.
Thank you, Jerry. Very rich discussion, very full discussion. I will say we jumped from our planned discussion to what seemed to be top of mind for folks was really understanding how we're going about teaching these ideas and who are the students we're teaching, what do they care about, and why are they part of this journey with us together. It seemed there was a split between those who had students that were very driven because they came from a business background and they were business students, versus those who might be more socially and ethically minded. We talked about the challenge with students who would be interested in being part of a class where we really were able to focus more on the mission that might come to bear throughout the journey of the course. So there was really a split between those who saw a mission-driven student and those who were very business-oriented. We came to the idea of really creating a value proposition for the student for the course was powerful. And being able to articulate and advocate not only for the business model canvas, but also the mission model canvas as well, so they could understand what the value might be. We also talked about the idea of 3 different ideas.
Sabra, pardon the interruption, but could you build that out a little bit? When you said a value proposition for the students, that was a key statement. Could you flesh that out?
Absolutely. We need to be able to frame for the students here's why you should care about this. Here's why it should make a difference to you. Here's how it's going to help you in your career. And understanding enough about the students so that we're able to speak to them about a value proposition that actually would resonate with them. And understanding how you might achieve that. So that seemed to be a very important factor. It's understanding the student experience so they can craft their own experience as well. I was
So
thrilled
you
to
build a
see
business model canvas. So you essentially build a value proposition canvas or some value proposition statement for the student in the course.
in the
And
course.
therefore, they
Absolutely.
exercise
Why
the
are they
first
here?
and then carry it
Why are
forward.
they here?
Why are they great?
Absolutely.
I was curious. I know you got more to say, but I want to challenge you with one thing and see if your group addressed it. You addressed the tension between mission-driven and call it business-driven. But did anybody in your group speak to how to reconcile, business using the capitalist system to achieve a mission, rather than seeing it as a sacrifice or secondary? That you had to sacrifice profit to achieve a mission. Did anybody in the group talk about that tension?
It seemed that we came to the understanding that students were motivated by different things. And so being able to understand how to meet both of those needs was powerful. And Jamie provided us the recommendation advocating both a mission model canvas as well as a business model canvas, right? And being able to speak the language of the student so that the student sees the value in the course and is able to accept the journey.
Well explained. Thank you very much. And I had interrupted you, so do you want to complete your thought?
Well, it was basically an ask for you all. We came up with, I think, two great ideas. How do we utilize an open source community to gather best practices and lessons learned from across this community? So very powerful, the expertise that folks bring to bear. How do we create an open source tool that might be able to do that? And then we also had great comment from Angie that, well, we're all talking about how we might be able to do this better. Why are we not talking to the students so that they can share their experiences and their impressions and their understanding and their needs? So 2 suggestions for the way forward.
And I just want to point to the chat that Elisa Dasa has shared an insight that builds on Sabra's insight about a personal value proposition for the course. And here's where people are building a personal value proposition around a problem they want to address. So thanks for that great report, Sabra. Ty, teach us, please.
So I don't have anything to teach, but I have some things to report. And
okay.
But I will say that one of the conversations, and Richard has challenged me to help write a book so we can pay for college for my youngest child. And that is that when we think
wait,
about
I'm sorry, Ty. If you think you make money writing a book, you gotta do better than me.
Richard, where are you at, buddy? So one of the things that he said that I thought was really important, he said that when you have a partnership, you have to think of partnerships in systems, and that you can have a partnership that is focused on strategy. Right? That's your primary thing. What is the strategic alignment between your university or your organization and your entrepreneurial endeavor? And then that is also connected with your symbolic pieces that you could, so that's surrounded. So some are strategically aligned, other are symbolically aligned. And then the third part I thought was interesting is like, how do you find partnerships that are outside what the norm is? And part of the conversation then came back to, at RIT, Rochester Institute of Technology, they have one of the largest deaf and hard of hearing communities at a university level anywhere. Unlike Gallaudet, though, they are, Gallaudet being a liberal arts program, RIT is a technological engineering program. And so they were able to find partnerships and start to execute partnerships that are strategic, that are symbolic and that are outside. And so they look at how do we find entrepreneurial opportunities working in the deaf and hard of hearing in our biomedical spaces. And so it was a great way to kind of think and articulate about how do you make choices about who you partner with. You just can't go willy-nilly in terms of your partnering. We also talked about
let me push you on that, Ty, for a second. In talking about collaborations or partnerships, did your group look at that certain partnerships can create resources where others can create opportunities and challenges? I mean, the nature of the underlying institution and it's what it can offer.
Yes.
Can you share anything in that?
Yeah, absolutely. What we had talked about is that you have to be very focused about how you create these partnerships. Some of them are required, so you have to be targeted, right? You got to think about what you want to do. Some of these partnerships, you have to think about who is going to benefit. So the old-fashioned whiff them, right? So you have to look at both sides of the, as Linda Bixby said, the bridge, because we said we looked at this boundary space in between what the university wants and what the other institutions you might partner with. You got to satisfy the space between, because if you don't, then that bridge never gets built. And when the bridge never gets built, you can do lots of great work in the entrepreneurial innovation space and nothing gets extracted. We didn't go as far as tech transfer or commercialization. Yes, exactly, Victor. It was literally about putting the students at the center and then trying to understand what they were looking for and developing that space. And not only that, you have to think about your partnership that you're trying to develop from the outside in, not just from the inside out. Right. So at Morehouse College, for instance, and I didn't know this, in terms of the VC, the students that graduate and go to VC venture capital spaces, Morehouse College is number 3 behind Stanford and Yale. Wouldn't have thought about that. Never considered that. All male school in the heart of downtown Atlanta, historically Black college, all male school. They are producing more VC focused folks than the only ones that outstrip them are Stanford and Yale. That part of what Livonia does is to go out and say, hey, listen, we have folks who are already in that space. How do we bring them back in to do some co-creation? Dennis Kennedy, thank you. This co-creation. How do we co-create the opportunity for partnership? And so what we ended up talking about is increasing your capacity by understanding the need for partners.
Amazing. So, there's been so much richness shared by everybody, and I really appreciate these 3 spokespersons for the groups, but we can't have that be the total reflection. I want to hear from everybody in the room. If you want to raise your hand, either in the chat or personally, as to how you would like to expand on some of these points. Because, Alex Gallo, I can turn to you first on the partnership issue, because you, with Common Mission Project, you've really led the way into building some very innovative partnerships that, frankly, to me, initially, when Steve and I discussed them, I was like, really? The Department of Defense? Really? Okay, you did that. But the State Department? I mean, okay, I understand the Department of Energy, I understand NIH, but really, I mean, you're reaching deep into these different types of partnership opportunities. Can you share with us how that sort of evolved, the history of that a little bit, so we can learn and maybe do some of that ourselves?
Sure. I mean, I think the partnership that we've done with the Department of Defense, has fallen into, 3 categories of value proposition. First, the Department of Defense recognized that most of the technology and innovation was occurring no longer inside the government, but outside the government. So they realized they had to find ways of accessing entrepreneurial thought and entrepreneurial entities such as startups and stuff. And so they thought of hacking for defense as a way to access that community. And so it really, again, the lesson there was very much around just understanding that value proposition and intimately. And we were only able to, understand that over time through discovery, but also, in the US government, they put it in their strategy documents. So there's a lot of strategic
Top
direction
down.
in this respect. Right. Exactly. The second element I would say has to do with them trying to build problem-solving communities. So, one of the value propositions for DoD is not only could they have student teams and other entities in the ecosystem work on unmanned aerial vehicle problems, for example, but they could cultivate a community that they could return to over time, which is another specific value, is that they needed to build ecosystems and be able to access that ecosystem, not own it, but be able to access that ecosystem over time. And then third and finally, this has a lot to do with our own, the U.S. democratic political system, is that they recognize that, Congress and other political leaders wanted to find ways to get students more connected to national and public service. And so in that respect, that was Department of Defense had a way for them to do that, a pathway for them to do that through Hacking for Defense. And then, of course, they benefited from the potential talent spotting. So in short, I think the top line point of our partnership thing is just really about discovery and really dialing in, understanding their value proposition over time and recognizing it's not one thing, but it's multiple things that can come together in a coherent way. And that's the final trick is in partnerships is trying to have multiple interest items come together in a coherent way. And I'll just pause there.
Well, I like the second item. I liked all three, but that the idea that you need to have everybody get value out of the partnership, and they want to build an ecosystem so it has residual feedback and residual benefit. I think that's really institution building and really community building. This is a conversation that can go on quite a way. I do want to point to the chat, and first I want to recognize Alex Osterwalder, who's joined us, and we're going to turn to in just a minute. Hi, Alex. The thing I want to think about here as we turn is coming up in the chat that I'm looking for the name. Was it Victor who made? Yeah, Victor Bruno. And I'm not going to call you out, Victor, but I love your comment about maybe we're losing the UX, the lack of of intriguing our students with new user interfaces, and that speak to them in the current context as our technology evolves. And I think that's a perfect bridge to Alex, because I think of the business model canvas. And Alex, I got to find you in my screen. If we could spotlight Alex, that would be great. There you are, Alex. I found you. Thanks. So, Alex, in turning to you, there's so many ways to introduce you. I mean, I have my bio, your bio here in front of me, and it says things I totally agree with. Alex Osterwalder is one of the world's most influential innovation experts, a leading author, entrepreneur, and in-demand speaker, blah, 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 right? Ranked number 4 in the Thinkers 50 list, yada, yada. I mean, you are a hero. And to me, one of the things you're a hero about is really UX. I mean, it's really the interface with how we look at a business and then how we can define and articulate a business's challenges. So, Alex, first of all, welcome. And I'll just give you a heads up in terms of where my first question is like, where I understand where the research came from, that, your PhD, et cetera, but how is it that you thought about using a graphic portrayal of a business? And where did that initial idea grab you? And then why did you have a passion for it? And what's it mean to you to see it have such an impact? But welcome, Alex.
Well, thanks for having me. Pardon my voice. I'm gonna speak as long as I can until it goes away. Those are good questions, and I think they're actually extremely important when we talk about these business tools. So the whole story started with my colleague and friend Yves Pigneur, who was my PhD supervisor, and he was just obsessed by this idea of we can do something with business models to replace the business plan. So already back then we were thinking of something better than the business plan. And our initial idea back then was could we build, something like computer-aided design for business building, right? So what architects do for buildings, why can't we do that for business? And we do it to a certain extent at the process level, but at the pure business level, how do I create, deliver, and capture value? So I went on with all this stuff, and we came up with some theoretical models. But then where the real kind of breakthrough came was when I put all this stuff online, people started to download it. At one point, I put the model, because it was an academic model at that point, out of my PhD dissertation. I put it on the wall, because we created a consulting firm, and then we drew lines around the boxes, the traditional kind of consulting boxes. This does that, and with arrows and everything. Just drew lines, and then it became a canvas. And then we realized, okay, well, that's much more practical to put sticky notes inside. So the concept was always robust, because we tested and iterated it with real business people. But I like what you said about the UX. That was just a concept. And then we worked on the UX and UI, the user interface of the tool. And, we were by far not the first to talk about business models. So it was really because we went the extra length of refining the concept, testing it. So it's kind of lean startup for business tools back then. And then really also looking at, simplicity, so the adoption would go up. And I think in particular, in academia, where I came from, I left academia a while ago, we sometimes underestimate the value of simplicity in the concepts we come up with. So I always have people who tell me, Alex, this business model canvas, it doesn't do competition, it doesn't do this and doesn't do that. Well, yeah, because it wasn't designed to do that, because you're not going to go and do heart surgery with a Swiss Army knife. So we were looking for one tool, a scalpel, to design business models and make it as simple and as practical as possible, so people can use it, from students to business people, and today even kids use it. We did a comic book around the topic. So that simplicity aspect is then reflected in the user interface and UX, and that's what we applied to all of the tools, because again, the business model canvas is one tool that does one thing. It never had the intent to do competitive environment, never had the intent to do value proposition. It just does one thing, and it does that really well. If you have other challenges, in entrepreneurship, you have 10,000 challenges, you need to use different tools, but you use them together.
So I just want to compliment you on the achievement, because I first came to the Canvas, as a result of working with Steve Blank. And, I always thought it was an important tool, but I was in a funny position with the National Science Foundation when I chaired the faculty there for 5 years, having to fight with people about using the Canvas. I mean, because this conversation, exactly the one you pointed to. Well, it doesn't have, venture capital sources, or, market segmentation, external factors. It's all the entity and not the external factors, et cetera. And everybody wanted to glom their own. I remember being in Singapore, and Eves was there, and, we were both resisting this. POChem was trying to get us to, glom different things on, right? And everybody has their own Canvas. My point is, and then I'm turning it back to you, is ubiquity. And I think there's power in simplicity, which is what you've created. And by having it have such broad dissemination by a faculty like ours here online with you today, we have ubiquity. When somebody comes up with a new Canvas, or whatever, which Canvas are you using, they like to say, I say, there's only one Canvas. It's Alex Osterwalder. And they say, well, why? Why that one? And I say, well, it's not better than anyone, but it's the one that 3 million people, or however many people, have bought the book about. That's the language. If you're going to teach your students something, why teach them Latin? Teach them English. You teach the language that everybody's using. So your visual portrayal is really a language. And I think as important as simplicity is its ubiquity. And I want to hear from you on that, because you are so global. Do you find it helps people collaborate and partner and communicate with each other when they're using this same framework?
So the shared language is extremely important for all these visual tools. So we came up with a couple more. So again, I think it's the right tools together, because as an entrepreneur or innovator, you face several challenges. The business model is one. but it does really create that shared language for teams from different backgrounds to come together, right? So business people will focus more on the revenue part, pricing, and so technology people will focus not even on the value proposition, but probably more on, feasibility. Can we build this thing? And then you have operations people, you have marketing people. But when you have a shared visual language, and the visual part here is important, people can come together and work on an artifact. You can't do that just in conversations, right? So if we just talk about business models, we think we're understanding each other, but it's this thing over here, that thing over here. But when you map it out visually, you make it very concrete. So this tangibility, putting up sticky notes on a wall and then, okay, really agreeing or disagreeing, that's the customer we want to go for, this is the value proposition, that makes a huge difference. So these types of visual languages, we use them a lot in technical domains, like in computer databases. Well, of course, you're going to use a visual language because it's complex. When we're talking about processes, we use a visual language to map these things out. So why don't we do more of that when it gets a bit more strategic, when we talk about business models, when we talk about value propositions, when we talk about organizational culture? We need to use the same kind of visual tools. And I would argue some are better, some are worse, right? The simple ones that do exactly what they say, they're generally better and their adoption goes up. So I think that shared language aspect is incredibly important in entrepreneurship, but then beyond, right? Because you want people to understand exactly the same thing. And one of the challenges, I'm an entrepreneur, right? So I'm facing all the challenges I try to help solve. The really difficult thing is to create alignment across a team. When you're two, okay, easy, co-founder, etc. But then you're starting to explain to investors, getting more complicated, right? How do you share that vision? Well, you better have a good story. And it's not just storytelling, it's getting concrete. Then, you move from 10 people to 100 people to 1,000 people. You're scaling your venture. You need these shared languages to get everybody on board. It's not good enough to just talk. Talking is important, but with visual language, you actually, put a layer there that increases the understanding and alignment exponentially. So it's not just the shared language to agree, it's really alignment. And you constantly come back to these things. That's also why these visual models work. When something changes, well, you need to change the visual model. You come back to that. So you always have a shared artifact to go back to.
The shared artifact, so important. I want to ask about the shared artifact and how it works in different environments. Because you talked about entrepreneurship and the special challenges and the enterprise and its own challenges, where it even has to communicate within the enterprise, let alone to outside resources. So you see this model deployed so often. So I want to talk about first how it's deployed in entrepreneurship versus major corporations. The same or different? What are the different tensions and how it's used? And then move to how we use it in education. And that'll really take it home for us in terms of how we deploy it. Because some of us are teaching more innovation, and which can be broadly deployed across corporations and entrepreneurial settings. And some of us are more inclined to be teaching more an entrepreneurial, focused context toward innovation. Yeah. So take us to the real world, first of all, the entrepreneurial world and the corporate world, and then take us to the educational world.
Yeah. So I do think that the educational world is getting closer and closer to the real world. That's what the beauty of using these tools and bringing in mentors and so on. But, at the end of the day, I think what's really exciting is we're going back to business fundamentals. What's your value proposition? What's your business model? Those sound like really trivial questions. They're business fundamentals. And why is this more important today than ever before? Because technology gives us way more choices. There is no right or wrong business model. There are 1,000 business models you can come up with. The question is, which one is going to work for a very particular context? And guess what? A business model in the venture world, in the startup world as entrepreneurship, and a business model in the corporate world, guess what? The basics are the same. It's a business model, creates value for customers. You capture that value, deliver that value. That's the same. So the business fundamentals are exactly the same. De-risking a business model, exactly the same, right? So you need to test desirability, feasibility, viability. So there's a lot that's overlapping in entrepreneurship and in innovation. So very, very many similarities. And then, of course, there's some differences, right? How you get funded, actually the fundamentals of funding with metered funding, you get a funding based on evidence. That's more and more taking over in the corporate world as well. Like we're trying to abolish business plans because they don't work, right? You pay people to execute a business plan. Well, guess what? They're going to execute a business plan and they're going to see it's not going to work. So I think the corporate world is catching up with the startup world, where these tools have taken on much faster. And I think entrepreneurship education also has been incredibly fast and ahead. And so what you're seeing today, if I look at the intersection of these two worlds, the kids coming out of entrepreneurship education and some, to a certain extent, innovation in education, they're better educated in these tools and processes than the innovators in corporations. And that's not a good match, right? Because the young people coming out being really well educated, doing these business model competitions, not business plan competitions, they're going to want to work at a world-class place where you apply modern entrepreneurship tools and modern entrepreneurship processes. So I think the corporate world has to catch up substantially. And again, there's a lot of similarities. Obviously, the big difference is in the corporate world, you're fighting for customers and you're fighting for buy-in from the corporation. So there's a lot more you need to put in place. But that's at the team level, it's very similar. In the corporation, you need to work much more on the environment. So it's a different challenge. How do I create that environment where top down, my leadership understands how it works, and bottom up, the teams can actually innovate. So the bottom part, the intrapreneurs or the entrepreneurs inside a company or the innovators, that work is actually very similar to the work of a startup. What's very different is, as a intrapreneur, you're often a startup in chains. So you're fighting for customers and you're fighting for management buy-in. But what we're seeing, and I have the opportunity very often to talk to these senior leaders. I gave a dinner talk last week to the leadership of a European bank with 70,000 people. And they were really fascinated and into this because innovation was a black box to them. It's not that they didn't invest in innovation. It's not that they weren't interested in innovation, but they didn't really know what should they do as senior leaders. What's their job? And I just, with the simplicity I kind of go for, I tried to explain to them, you have two worlds in a corporation: exploit, explore. Exploration is the world of entrepreneurship. Exploitation is the world of management, of MBAs. That's fine. There's no value judgment here. They're just different. And our friend Steve Blank likes to say, right, the people in exploit, they pay the salaries, and the people in explore, they pay the pension. That's the kind of mindset you need to put in place. But today, I think where it's lacking in innovation in large companies, or it's not even large, even medium-sized, it's that the teams are well educated, but the leaders are not yet up to date, and the corporate structures are absolutely not up to date with the kind of organizational speed we need today to embrace entrepreneurship inside corporations. But it's happening.
So this kind of risk-taking then, for taking the risk within entrepreneurship or within the corporation. I love these said the entrepreneur in chains is inside the corporation. Are you seeing the tool enabling the risk-taking that needs to occur?
So let me actually sketch something out. Let me see if I can.
Please
my
do.
iPad here. I'm going to draw something, because if I just use words, it's not going to be clear, right? So
But we need
if
an
I'm
artifact, right?
Yeah, if I'm spotlighted, I guess people should see it, right? So it's actually, if you take a team goes from idea to a real business, right? And getting from here to here with customer development, lean startup, business model canvas, that's progress, right? Getting from the left-hand side to the right-hand side. Now, in the venture world, a startup gets capital and the VC invests in many different startups. Now, what do we need to educate established companies to do is to understand they can't pick the winner. So they need to invest in 10 teams, 100 teams, 200 teams. And then after 3 months, something like 3 months, after a first sprint, could even be shorter, you kill or to make it a nicer word, you successfully retire 75% of projects and you only invest in 25% here. And then you do the same thing one more time, 75%. So what now happens is in a corporation, you're going to say for internal projects, I'm not talking about corporate venture capital here, you're going to create the same kind of funnel. You're going to not look at return on project, the business plan approach or business case approach. No. You're going to look at return on portfolio. So companies can actually manage risk by investing in a portfolio. And this is happening now, right? So you now have corporations who understand how to do this. The two examples we often use is Bosch. They invested over 3 years in over 200 projects to create 20 winners. So in the general exploit world of corporations, you say 20 winners and you needed 200. Well, that's a failure, right? But if you understand how innovation works, you know that 10% is already very good. So you diversify your risk. So what you have now in corporations is a different way of investing in projects where you execute. I'm building a new factory, no failure allowed, right? You're going to invest 10 million, 100 million, build that factory on time, on budget. You're going to invest in innovation. You're not investing in one lighthouse project. You're investing in 5, 10, 100, depending on the size of the return, depending on the risk profile. So we're seeing two different investment systems, two different cultures, two different processes, right? One entrepreneurship, one management in the same company. And the challenge that corporations have is to create this dual culture under the same roof. In academia, this was often called ambidextrous, right? And we've been talking about this for a long time, but now it's happening. That's the exciting thing. Companies are becoming ambidextrous, and it's not just an organizational structure thing. It's a mental mindset. As a CEO, I might spend 40% of my time with the mindset of an entrepreneur, and I need to understand uncertainty. I'm investing differently. And then maybe 60% or 40% of my time I spend on execution, running the business. I'm going to switch, I'm going to flip the switch and I'm going to think in a different way. So this is really, really a dual mindset that we need to educate people with. And that's not just in entrepreneurship, it's actually also in management, because these two worlds need to live together. So if the entire business education doesn't understand these are two different professions, we're not really going to get, good companies, because entrepreneurs one day they also become execution machines if the startup is successful. So they also need to understand there are two ways of managing the world.
Yeah, that's a fascinating insight, and we're seeing a lot of emergence of venture studios and other types of corporate innovation labs. Maybe you can speak to beyond the tools. Speak to what you're seeing in terms of the communities you speak to. One of the big topics for today was partnerships and how educational institutions can leverage collaborations with institutions, whether it's governments or corporations or foundations. And I was wondering if you're seeing an appetite for this in terms of your corporate clients and what kind of collaborations you think faculty should be striving to achieve.
I think it's really interesting to see what's emerging, right? So if you take corporations, they're starting to understand this dual ecosystem, that they need to build a whole innovation ecosystem. And there's not one size fits all, right? Every company needs to find their own mix. Some are going to do more on their own, think Tencent. Some are going to do more, other way around. Take Amazon, They do more on their own and then they make big acquisitions. You take some other companies that invest in hundreds of startups, right? And then you have others that really do open innovation with universities. So this is a whole mix that's going to happen. I think the challenge is sometimes we look at it too much at the micro level. So we'll say, oh, venture studio, great. And we're going to build startups. Okay, fine. That still means you need to get the macro picture right, where leaders understand not every venture is going to be a winner. So you first need to get the fundamentals right, that everybody needs to understand. Okay, in this venture studio, I'm going to invest in projects and some are going to fail. That's how the startup world, that's how innovation works. If you're not up for that, you're not going to win, because what happens when teams come into a venture studio and they have to win, you just condemn the team to succeed. So what's going to happen? They're going to play it safe, or they're going to hide all of the failures. They're just going to execute an idea that they sold to whoever, the investors, right? So they need to be free to act like a real startup that can fail. Nobody wants failure, but it's inevitable. And the good news with all the education we're doing is we're killing useless projects faster. And to a certain extent, the last couple of years, that was not entirely true because there was too much money around. So a lot of projects got a ton of money and they were executed rather than, you know, the typical kind of thing that we teach. Think Quibi, right? The wonderful video platform. So even Jeffrey Katzenberg, who was involved, says, well, that was not the right way to do it. They put a lot of money, over $1 billion, into executing a new thing. And that's rarely going to work. And we see it again and again and again. Too much money reduces the risk, right? And it actually puts pressure on having to succeed. What you want is to say, no, we're going to test fast. We're going to kill a lot of projects, but we can't iterate ourselves to success. So the fundamentals first, we need to accept a mindset where failure is an option. It's never a desire. That's why we manage return on portfolio. And when academia understands that, and the corporate partner understands that, and they're aligned, that's when you can create beautiful things. And it's not about, hey, now everything goes because failure is allowed. No, it's managed failure with managed risk because we're investing in portfolios. And the really exciting thing in these partnerships is use shared tools, use shared metrics. We now know how to measure the reduction of risk and uncertainty in the whole testing approach. We know how to do that based on different types of evidence. That's the kind of stuff that now academia and corporations can work together with, same tools, same processes to make the magic happen. Because in the academic world, we can do things that we can't do in the corporate world. So I really do believe there's a huge opportunity there with the tools that are being adopted more, with the mindsets that are being adopted more.
It came up very much in the conversations about even the mindset problem that failure was not necessarily seen as a learning opportunity. Yeah, but failure, even in an academic sense, was in certain cultures really seen as a personal failure. And so this idea of learning through minimum commitments against goals, having many shots on goal, and accepting that many will not get across the finish line, you know, is a big idea. And, you know, Alex, I was going to turn to Alex Gallo just for a minute here to inject. In the government context, this must be even worse. You know, yeah, Alex Osterwalder is telling us about the corporate context. Tell us about the government context.
Yeah, I mean, well, obviously in the government tends to be highly risk averse and you know, will not experiment as much because they have a lot of different entities to answer to. They have 535 members of Congress that they often have to answer to, and they have to show performance and execution. So yeah, it's highly risk averse. That said, I think you can find ways for the government to step outside of itself, create like an authority, a legal authority moat, if you will, to allow them to experiment. And we've seen some of that in the US government context where there are some opportunities for experimentation, but overall, yeah, highly risk averse.
Great.
Yeah.
So Alex, I wanted to introduce another topic, which is sort of globalization and international trends in the innovation space, just from your personal experience. Any insights you have about you know, differences in terms of economies, business leaders being more adaptive to thinking in terms of models versus others. And so, because we have an international audience here.
Yeah, and first I just want to quickly go back, if I
Sure.
may, to the government. So that's exactly why we need to talk about return on portfolio. So you're actually not talking about the failure of a project. You're talking about, okay, we invested 10 million in this portfolio and we got 100 million back, right? Because you now have, you really spread the risk. And frankly, I can almost, my team always tries to hold me back when I say, you give me $1 million, I can guarantee you 10 million back. And of course, it's not that easy. But when you work with that right portfolio approach, you can really do it. And I do think it's starting to resonate. I had the opportunity to work with a couple of cities. Vienna was one where we did some talks, and then in Odense in Denmark. And they get it, right? This whole idea of return on portfolio, and that is different from a return on project. And the fundamental thing here is, and I'll get to your question, Jerry, the fundamental thing here is that you need to look at different things. So the mindset changes, right? So and let me just, I have to go quickly back to a drawing.
It's okay, draw.
Draw. So this continuum here is really, really important, right? Exploit, explore. And sometimes we think of it, this is just organizational structures, you know, something in the org chart up here, and then something in the org chart down here and down here. But again, let me come back to this needs to be in the head, the mindset. When people get that, they get much more comfortable with how to manage this, right? So if I'm a leader, in the morning, I might be dealing with the team building a factory. I'll ask questions about on time, on budget. So I'm going to look at that type of risk, and I'm going to see, you know, are these teams managing well? Now, in the afternoon, I'm going to talk to 5 innovation teams. I need to flip that switch, and now I'm in a different mindset. I'm going to ask, okay, what's the evidence that we gathered by running these experiments? How much did we learn? Should we continue, or should we kill this thing? Like, is it time to actually stop, right? After 3 months, you need to ask that question. And if leaders understand that, and when I'm saying leaders, it's basically everybody in the company, then the magic starts happening. So in a government context, you just need to educate the leaders and the stakeholders as much as the innovation teams who really understand this, right? This is the only way. And when you put it as a mindset that everybody can make that flip, you know, from high uncertainty innovation, low uncertainty execution. When people get that, magic happens, right?
Yeah.
And now
I just want to stick on your exploit explore for a minute before we go to that last question, because it's so important. I can dial back for a minute, and I think it's so important in the classroom that we say this is an exploration. This class is about exploration. It's not about exploiting. And you're right, removing the taint away from the word exploit. I think we need a better word. It has to begin with.
Yeah, it sounds terrible.
Yeah, but sincerely, when we started this journey, and I would call it 1990 as a date, okay, that this journey gets started, to put a stake in the ground. And we were going to deans of business schools, and we were saying, you're not teaching entrepreneurship. And the leaders in this discussion at the time was Jeff Timmons and people like that, Howard Stevenson. We would draw a line, but it was we used a sine curvy line to show the life of an entrepreneurial venture. But we said what we're teaching is the right-hand side, exploit. We didn't call it exploit, but we're teaching management. In order to manage, you need something to manage, right? There's no business on the left-hand side, which is just losing money, right? And that's it. We didn't have the vocabulary at the time. We didn't have the imagery, but we're saying, this thing on the left-hand side, the explorer, is entrepreneurship, and we don't teach that. And it took a decade for the tools to evolve, that we began to understand that what we're teaching on the left-hand side is not a small version of the right-hand side. In other words, exploring is not a small version of exploiting. And therefore, the business plan doesn't work. That's why the business plan doesn't work, because business plan, any plan with no forks, is simply, a road to nowhere. It's simply a road that's a hope. So anyway, all this. So I don't mean to go on, but I can just put it exactly in the context that we're teaching exploration. And I think that's something so much we as educators can carry forward to our classes and say over and over again. And your idea of portfolio return, maybe we can even help the class say that our class is a portfolio. So by helping us all learn together and learn from each other examples, we are creating, there's going to be a success. There are 10 projects in this class. One of them is going to be a breakout for further, exploitation. We don't know which one that's going to be, but no matter who it is, that's a win, right? And that means, making guaranteeing that, yes, we'll make 10 million out of 1 million. Yes, if you have enough N, if you have a big enough sample, we'll have those outlier successes. That's a great inspiration. So take us
Can I build
home.
on that? Jerry,
Yes,
can I build on
please.
that
Go
for a
ahead.
second? 'Cause I love that idea, right? That you look at the class as a portfolio, and then if you really push it, right, at the end of the class, you look at which teams should go on and which teams should retire their idea, because then you make it perfectly okay. And the reason you can kind of do this without it becoming subjective is because you know exactly what kind of evidence you should be able to deliver until the end of the class, right? And the big challenge actually today in corporations is we're going to need to find a way to improve the incentive system. So not only those that win, like in the startup world, take away all the millions. You actually want, in a portfolio approach, you want everybody to benefit. And that's when you can have employed entrepreneurs. And I think that's the exciting thing for entrepreneurship education. A lot of entrepreneurship educators will, educate students that will go into corporations to do this. So you'll create corporate, entrepreneurs, and they should, and we're not there yet. We should have different incentive systems. So even the losers in quotes, or those whose projects were successfully retired, get something from the portfolio, right? So I think we're not quite there yet. In the startup world, it's much more brutal. It's only the winners who take everything away. To a certain extent, that makes it a bit, crazy. And then it gets a bit ruthless, as we've seen in the last couple of years. But I think there's something there to create a really interesting entrepreneurship ecosystem in companies that's a little bit less ruthless than what we might have in the startup world.
Perfect. I want to invite others into the conversation, if I may, Alex. And I don't want to impose on your time, but if we can go till 45 minutes after the hour collectively, that'll be great. I want to invite Phil Weilerstein and Ty Smith into the room. They have the designated roles to be discussants with me. And then others to pose questions in the chat, please do, for Alex, and we'll try and bring them forward. Phil, we all know you, I think, as the leader of VentureWell, a wonderful organization that supports entrepreneurship on campus. You want to come into the conversation, and then we'll invite Ty?
Yeah, so I wanted to start with just a resounding affirmation of the importance of common language. I think it really can't be understated how much of a difference it made to have a language that talked about opportunity rather than the business on the execution side. And you see this, we've all seen this, people who haven't really even got their arms around what it is they want to do, talking about quantities and execution rates and timelines and so forth. And really what people need to do is to focus in on validating ideas, validating the proposition, developing the evidence. So having a way for people to interact around that has really made a big difference, both in the ability of educators to teach at a cadence that helps people to understand this. Your structure around the Canvas actually allows people to focus in different areas at different times educationally. And I just want to emphasize, and I think there are lots of great examples in the room of how this has been used, where even within a course, there's sort of a tendency to stay on one side of the canvas, so as to stay focused, not allow people to get distracted by moving into how they might build, how they might execute. And I think that's been very, very valuable, particularly in some of the work that we do with very early stage entrepreneurs and student entrepreneurs. I think the other aspect of this, to come to your portfolio analogy, in the educational domain, it's very interesting to think about how this plays out in people's heads. And I have the privilege, I guess you could say, of working with many, many entrepreneurs. Our program supports over 2,000 entrepreneurs a year who are developing these innovations in a wide variety of programs and domains. Many of them don't succeed. And so for them to understand what they're doing as not that they're going to die on the beach, but rather they're part of a process of changing the flow is really important. And I would love to hear from you sort of how you would encourage people to think about that as the participant in the use of a canvas, and how they can engage with that idea to not just make themselves feel better, but actually join kind of a different understanding of what entrepreneurship really starts with.
Back to you, Alex.
Sorry, can you repeat the question?
Yeah, so the question really is about, you know, that idea that if there's a portfolio approach, there's an understanding at the outset that many of the folks who are working on this idea are not going to be taking it forward. And yet you're wanting them to put their all into it. So, you know, we kind of need to actually come up with better ways to help people understand that, and maybe even motivational structures within an educational environment that support that. And there's a little bit of chatter about this in the chat. I'm just curious if you've seen things like that and how it might work.
So I think first and foremost, we need to educate, you know, entrepreneurs, future entrepreneurs, that it's okay not to win every time, right? So talk to the most successful entrepreneurs and you'll hear a long history of learning before they really made it, right? They were in several startups in different roles, and it's only, you know, in the press, I feel that you have this, you know, young Stanford dropout on the cover of a magazine. Well, you know, that's the rare exception. Most entrepreneurs, if you look at the research, you know, the most successful entrepreneurs, scale entrepreneurs, not small size business, but scaling entrepreneurs, they're over 40. So I think we need to also teach a bit around the reality of entrepreneurship. You're not going to get it right the first time. It's actually very rare. You might get it right till maybe $1 million, $5 million, $10 million business. But if you're aiming for a bit bigger, that's super rare. So I think we should first, you know, just kind of explain how this game works, and that it's so hard that it's not, you know, a process and some tools alone that's gonna, you know, make it work for you. So the analogy I like to use is medical education. Think of a doctor. How long does it take, you know, to become a really good surgeon? So first you learn anatomy, physiology, read the books, then you do internships. But until you get really good and you're allowed to do the hard stuff, it takes a long time. In entrepreneurship education, well, it's a couple of courses, we read a couple of books, and then we do 1 or 2, you know, real things. And then we think we're going to succeed big time. That's not how it works, right? So let's just kind of, you know, make the reality real, show the statistics, and explain how okay it is to learn for 5, 10 years. If you succeed at 30, you're still, you know, way below the average of the most successful entrepreneurs and the scale entrepreneurs, right? So I think there's this impatience, you know, created also by the press, by the people we put on cover of magazines, and now it's, you know, the 15 under 15 or 10 under 10, it's going to be soon, that made it big. Like, that's just the exception, and this sensationalism takes away the reality of how hard entrepreneurship is, and that it's okay to learn for 5 and 10 years until you really make it. As long as you don't waste anybody's money, or let me make a bad joke, as long as you don't, you know, say, hey, sorry, I lost $8 billion, I fucked up, you know, that's okay. That's not the kind of failure we want to teach. Right? So, and if you didn't realize, it's referring to FTX. So we're living in a bit of a world where we're creating this entrepreneurship image that is just not true. And as educators, we need to bring the reality back and make it feel like it's okay to not succeed in your first 5 ventures, maybe not the ones you create yourself, but that's the reality. So I get a bit passionate about this because there's this unreal image that is projected by the media that we should fight against, because it creates the kinds of excesses that we've seen with FTX. And so that's not normal. And as educators, we have a role to bring the normal back, right? And I think we can, because the research is clear. The research is very clear. You're not going to get right the first time. The most successful ones are over 40. Guess what? It has to do with experience. So let's just bring a little bit of this back. And then, you know, it's okay to fail. I think in society, we have a bit of a fear of failure. Again, we say Silicon Valley is different, but, you know, it's actually something we need to work for. Sorry, I get a bit excited about this because it's a big topic. It's a really big topic.
It's a great topic. So framing our whole educational process as a place where failure is safe and it's actually learning, and how you can set boundaries for yourself, learn the skills to set boundaries of protection for yourself, so you can mitigate risk and manage risk as you get educated in the real world. Ty, bring us into, you know, the issues that you've been discussing with folks today.
So hi, Alex. I was one of those guys who back in the day got the free version, the first 72 pages when you put it out there, let people kind of play with it back in 2009 and went, oh my God, this is a way to think about everything that I was doing. I was also one of those folks that was trapped in a government environment, working for the Department of Defense. And I think that what was so powerful, including what we've been talking about today, in particular, when we look at partnerships, is that the thing that Canvas does, it allows me to see an entire ecosystem. And the way that I always taught it was, if it touches here, it has to have a relevance. Something else happens over here on the other side, right? And so there was at one point you had a blog post, the 14 ways that you could use the business model Canvas. I mean, this thing is like 2010 or 2011. Yeah, I used it, right, to help people think about that. And I think it's such a powerful way to understand it. And so your explore exploit, for those of us who have to work inside of organizations as educators, it allows us a space without risk, I think, to go to our leadership and say, listen, I don't want any money. I just want you to look at this, right? Because if we do this, this might happen. Right? We've run this tabletop exercise. And for those in the military environment, they understand tabletops, right? And I think that's powerful. The other part that I really was intrigued by in return on portfolio, I think that's a powerful notion for those of us who are part of partnerships. What you said was in for $1 million, out for 10, right? Or something along that line. We used to talk about in the government, cost per unit value. That's how I did the bottom, right? In the mission space, I don't care. They'll say, well, somebody's going to die if we don't do this. Cool. But is that worth the effort? Or we would say, how much money is spent of this $1 spent on overhead, the back end feasibility stuff? And they would go, about 80 cents out of $1. I'm like, what organization in the world would spend 80% of its time doing bullshit? And so I really appreciate, and I'm gonna stop it at 4:45, but this has really been about how do we teach these principles to our students? Because particularly, and I know some of the work that you've been doing with your wife and your children, helping them understand, and then your social entrepreneurship stuff, which a lot of us are involved in. How do we get folks introduce these concepts that allow people to utilize these tools in a way that we can solve some of these hard problems that are out there in the world, in a ways that people create stuff? And that's what we do at Common Mission Project. I know you know that with Pete and Steve and all the rest of those guys. Thank you.
Can I build on that for a second? Because what you made me realize something that I didn't say. So you're absolutely right with that. There's another way to frame the return on portfolio. If you say, look, you give in government, and that's not just for military, for all kinds of government projects, and even for NGOs, right, for not-for-profit and intergovernmental organizations like the UN. When you give a project money, you expect them to succeed. What you just did is you condemned them to succeed.
Yep.
So what is a team going to do? They're going to play it safe because they have to succeed. And when you have to succeed, the big innovations can't emerge, right? So if you go back, the venture capital history of Silicon Valley is pretty fascinating. Well, why did some big projects kind of emerge? Because there was a willingness to invest in portfolios.
Yep.
So it's very clear that you can't get the big winners without, and let's call them that way, right, investing in the losers in quotes. So that's why in government, we actually, by not doing that, what we do is the projects get bigger and bigger. Yep. So we just waste a lot of money for one big project, right?
Yep.
In particular, in the military, they can become very big. So what you really want is a portfolio approach to diversify the risk, and the risk stays small and manageable, rather than creating this mega monster that has to succeed. And I think that's something that we can really help in education for the really big challenges. That's the kind of approach we need, right? Poverty alleviation, the health sector. We need to not invest in projects, but in portfolios, so that the teams are not condemned to succeed. Because the big ideas, they come out of crazy stuff. So you'll have 10, you'll have 100, one will work. But if all have to work, you're never going to get the big innovation. So you reminded me of that because I was talking to some government officials about that. This is big. And if the government or, even NGOs can't invest like that, they're never going to get the big innovations that are going to help us with the big challenges. And we do have a couple of challenges in the world these days, right?
Yeah, I really do think that you're onto something about what we used to talk about, the inverse incentives. The incentives are upside down. You give you a year's worth of money, people go out and buy pencils. Why are you buying pencils? Because we have to spend all this money, because if we don't, they'll take it away, right? They'll take the money away, which is the dumbest thing I've ever heard in my life. We're actually creating innovation, saving money, creating value, doing mission, and we didn't spend it all. You're going to take the rest away. No, you should be giving me more money. Thanks. I appreciate you.
So, and I appreciate the conversation. Alex, you've given us more time than we asked for and you committed to. So I just want to give recognition. I would like everybody to turn on their cameras and express their appreciation to Alex for coming. Let's give him a round of applause.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much for having me. It's a real pleasure and honor to you.
It's an honor for us, of course. And just know that your words today have had an amplification effect, that each of us carry forward, a bit of more knowledge than we had when we came in, and we really appreciate it. So thank you very much, Alex. Cheers.
Thanks for having me. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
So we'll be talking with each other for just a few more minutes with summation comments and talk about where we go from here. I do want to hear one more time from our core collaborators and core sponsors, from both Alex representing CMP and from Phil representing VentureWell. And we have Bowie still on, a representative from Bowie still here.
Let me see if she is.
I'm being a bit spontaneous, but I just want to recognize that this has been a pretty good experience for all of us, I hope. And it's definitely been a rich one for me. And it didn't happen, on its own. It really happened through the support of some great organizations. And I want to express my appreciation, and I want them to give their final comments. I'll give a head note to my final comments, which is simply my biggest takeaway. And, from this, and I didn't really necessarily expect to get a fresh insight today. I was more involved in, is this going to work? Are we going to have enough people? Are we going to have high quality content? But I learned something. And my big takeaway for today, for me, was the importance of mindset. That was not the head note item for our agenda. If I was going to say, well, what did we plan to talk about? Well, we really talked, mindset was one, and there was tech commercialization, and there was, diversity of inclusion. But all those things, I think, are embraced for me, and the takeaway is about entrepreneurial mindset, and not just entrepreneurial mindset for our students, but entrepreneurial mindset for the people that we build partnerships with, for the other side of the paradigm. And having a broader mindset, an exploration mindset, one that tolerates failure, one that's willing to take mitigated risk, measured risk, one that sees collective success in any individual success. These are big takeaways I think got spoken to in each of the conversations when taken collectively. So I want to thank you for that gift to me personally of helping me have that thought. I'm going to turn to Ty and Alex and Phil. Phil, I'll come to you last. So just Ty, any closing remarks from you?
I would prefer to go last so I can give the final instruction before we say goodbye.
Yeah, you'll give. I understood. You were going to get that shot anyway.
Oh,
Alex. Alex, go for it.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, Jerry. Thank you, everybody. For those, my background has been working in national security policy here in the United States and overseas. And just from my perspective, I think, this approach where we bring together the government, universities, and private sector, and the entrepreneurial frameworks and mindsets that we use is never been needed more. Never been needed more. All the problems that we face in society today are cross-sector in nature. We need creative new solutions, and we need not just governmental, capacities, but we need entrepreneurial organizations to sustain the solutions. And that's why I think mission-driven organizations are very critical, because the criticality of it is once market forces are applied to a mission-driven entrepreneurial organization, it will sustain that solution into the future. So again, I think, this has never been more needed. And then I'll just end simply where I began, that just my hope and call to action today is I just really encourage everybody to continue the conversation. We have the Lean Innovation Educator Slack. I would love to invite everybody to keep sharing their best practices there. And then obviously share your ideas, because all this learning that Jerry noted can continue beyond this summit. So again, thank you all for that.
Yeah, Alex, thanks for calling out the Slack channel. And if somebody would please post the Slack channel in the chat so everybody knows where it is. But it actually worked pretty well last time. We had a really active chat for a month or two after the event. So it's a place where you can not only chat now, but you can look back at prior comments and resources that have been shared. It's a great spot. And I know we have the Padlet, and Ty's going to tell us about that. Phil, takeaways from today.
Yeah, so this has been once again a really rich and wonderful community experience. And thank you very much, Common Mission, for sustaining and organizing today's effort, and Jerry, you for leading it. As I said earlier, we have a shared language, and we can do a lot for the world with it. I'm very pleased that there's so many institutions on here that are building and expanding programs. And to go back to Jerry's, 30 years ago vision and where we are, I think to have a regular convening of folks who are working at scale around the world to do this work is really meaningful. And I think it's very important for you to continue to share what you're doing. Alex is doing amazing work, but I know many of you actually are doing pretty incredible innovations, even building on Alex's work, but also in the way that you're approaching your particular community. So I would encourage that we keep in touch, use the Slack channel. The VentureWell community also wants you to participate if you're focused on science and tech innovation. If you want to go deeper on some of the things that were shared today, putting in the Slack, our annual meeting open takes place in March, an opportunity for workshops and lots of, spend 4 or 5 hours talking about how you do this work and get some tips and takeaways for the work to, or share your tips and takeaways with other people. Really wonderful to be supported by this community. I would second what Alex said about the world needs us. It's not just a thing to say. It's actually, I think, very, very true. And the innovation in how we do it is part of what we need to bring to it, if you know what that means. We're changing the way that people learn to become entrepreneurs. We're changing those pathways. A lot of conversation today about inclusion, which is, I think, really critical to bring the full power of our communities and the full power of humanity really to problem solving. So really applaud that effort and look forward to seeing what comes next.
Inspirational words. And I just want to be tactical and double down on +1 for open. It's a great event. Phil, are you just doing it physically, or are you doing it virtually as well this year?
No, we'll be back in person this year. So yeah, looking forward to actually getting together all again. And we'll be taking lots of precautions to make sure we stay safe.
Fantastic. So we've had a lot of, I'm supposed to have a call to action. My own script says, okay, Jerry, call to action. And I think we've had a lot of calls to action. I just want to second them all. This is important work, and we know how to do it, and we're learning how to do it better. And it's even better when we do it together. That's a takeaway for me. There's always something new to learn about how to do this well, and it's better when we do it together. So let's continue to learn together and to share together, however we come together, whether it's through the Common Mission Project and collaboration there, VentureWell, or other local organizations or other organizations we're part of. Let's continue to support our good work. Thank you all very much for being here. Ty, you have some very important comments for us for mechanically and administratively what we can do to continue our good work together.
Yes. So I want to thank all of you on behalf of the Common Mission Project, as well as our partners VentureWell, GCEC, of which Jerry and Janetta are members of the executive board, and Bowie State, where I am an entrepreneur in residence as well as a faculty member. We want to thank all of you for sticking with us. I will say to my team that I work with, the team that was behind there, so that's Edie, that's Jennifer, that's Jim, Rodrigo, Joe, Matt, Sean, Alex, and others that were part of this team. I want to thank all of you for making this successful. It really was. There was a lot that went on today, and we had a lot of moving parts, and it was very different, but the learning was rich. And for all of you that came, guess what? You're going to get an email to say, this is what we hope that you will continue to do. There'll be an email coming out, hopefully by Monday, where you'll have some links. We'll have the Slack channel up. We're going to say, oh, please go out and just continue to, actually we'll go out before then. We'll try to get it by Friday, to go out and still participate in the Padlet. I'm sure there's going to be plenty of information that's going to swath over you. You're like, I want to add that. Because again, what we're going to do is take all of that information. And we were talking earlier about Victor writing the Chat GPT. If you haven't seen it, it's the AI. We're going to collect all this stuff and we're going to run it through the AI. It's going to help us craft a skeleton of all of your information, of all of your thoughts, that sometime, hopefully in February, you'll be able to come back to commonmission.us and pull off and find the white paper for all of your thoughts. And so again, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you, everybody.
Bye, everyone.
Just to say, Jerry, Ty,
Bye.
thank
Thank
you
you.
very much. I loved the chat today.
Happy
It was
Kwanzaa,
very
happy
insightful.
Festivus,
Thank you, everyone. You
happy
guys are-
Hanukkah.
Thank you. Thank you all.
That's true. Merry Christmas, Hanukkah,
Oh,
Happy New
yeah.
Year to everybody.
Let's hope 2023 is a better year than the last few.
Will be, Tony, will be.
All right.
Thanks, Ty. Thanks, Jerry.
You're very welcome.